gorgeous day. I was just thinking of Fred Rogers, a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood of God consciousness. So today the topic is bliss out. And I'm going to start with a joke here. And so, I always love monk and nun jokes just because it's familiar to me. So a new monk arrives at the monastery, and he's assigned to help the other monks in copying the old texts by hand. Clearly, this is pre-technology. This was centuries ago. He notices, however, that they are copying copies and not the original books. And so he tells the abbot, the superior of the community, the head of the community, he said, we're recopying these manuscripts. However, we're copying copies, and maybe they aren't really accurate. And so the older monk, he says, well, we've always done this. He said, however, maybe it's time to change that. Maybe we could look at doing it a different way. And you're making a really good point. So the older monk, the head of the monastery, goes down to the cellar where these documents are, and he starts reading, and hours go by, like about 4 hours go by, and nobody sees him. And so they got concerned. Did something happen to him? What's going on here? And so one of the monks went down, and as he approached where the abbot was, he heard this sobbing, this intense crying and sobbing. And he got to the older monk and he said, what's wrong? And the older monk, with tears in his eyes, looked at him and said, the word is celebrate, not celibate. Anyway, I appreciated that, having been celibate for several years in my life. So the word is celebrate. So we're about celebrating. Life is a celebration. Even in the midst of those times that seem difficult, that seem challenging, we can still celebrate life. So the reason, Reverend Cindy, that your reading from Joel Goldsmith was so on spot is that last night I decided to look up the word bliss. I always think I know what these words mean, and they do, and the definitions were similar to what I believed. And what it said bliss meant was complete happiness and heaven or paradise. Heaven or paradise. And in our teaching, heaven isn't something that we look forward to in the great by and by. In our teaching, heaven is here, heaven is now. Heaven and hell are states of consciousness, and I can decide what state of consciousness to live in. And so your meditation was so perfect, Reverend Cindy, because it took us to that place of heaven within us, and it's always within us, and it's always possible to live in that state of consciousness. So when we look at bliss or joy, I'm going to use those words interchangeably because real joy is bliss. We want to take a look at what is joy, how do we experience joy, and what I would say right now is that joy is an experience of our deepest soul nature. That joy is always present within us because joy is a divine quality. It's not something we get from the outside world. See, a lot of people think they can only be happy if things are going their way. I probably thought that at one point in my life too. That, and there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is, it's a very limited way of looking at things. When you look at very, very young children who haven't yet been influenced by the world, even by their parents too much, when you look at children, they are naturally joyful. They are naturally creative. They are naturally playful. They are naturally intuitive. They naturally try new things. They don't cry and make a big to-do, I did it wrong, if they fall down, or if something doesn't quite go the way they thought. Children, by nature, are that way. So we're born that way. We're born with innate joy within our souls. And then we take on the stuff of the world. And we talk about this all the time, don't we? How there's that perfection within, there's that God essence within, and it gets covered over by old programming. It gets covered over by things that the world tells us. It gets covered over by our own expectations of what life should be. You see, many people only experience joy and happiness when things are going their way, when perhaps their relationship is loving, or perhaps there's been a problem with it and now there's forgiveness. Oh, good, that makes me happy. You know, uh, they experience joy perhaps when there's a financial windfall. Oh, good, this money came. Now I can be happy. You know, when their body is working well, when they're, you know, I was thinking this morning when I was meditating, I wasn't thinking, but it came to my mind that, you know, people with really tight abs and toned bodies, you know, I'm sure that makes them very, very happy. Um, I'm happy that my body works the way it does. And that's not the source of my joy. When something happens, and I've had a couple of things happen in my life, where the body didn't seem to be working so well, it doesn't take away the joy, you see, because the joy is always present within. It's a matter of us tuning into it. It's a matter of us contacting that joy. So what's the deal here? If we are innately joyful, innately blissful, that's our state, our natural state, what happens? You know, why are so many people in the world depressed, unhappy? And by the way, you can feel sad and still know that joy within you. Let's be clear about that, because it is a state of consciousness. So what happens here is that many people live in a state of chronic anxiety. You can see it all the time, can't you? We can see it nowadays. We can see it. We can see it when the news is broadcast. People being anxious, people, this isn't right. I can't be happy. I have to be miserable because this is going on. We don't have to take on misery and suffering. Pain will happen. Pain is different. Pain is there to teach us something, to wake us up to something. However, as I've said over and over and over again, we don't have to allow it to become suffering so that we're continually camped out in that territory of suffering. In other words, you know, we're made to walk through the darkness. We're made to walk through the valley of darkness, the valley of death. We aren't meant to set up camp there. We aren't meant to build a whole city there. And many of us have done that. You know, we have these personality constructs that have taken on all this stuff. And so the question is then, how do I return to this place of joy? How do I live a joy-filled life? And it's not even, here's the thing for me, even wanting that can become an addiction if we're attached to it, or if we're attached to the way it has to look. Returning to our joy is returning to our wholeness. It's returning to who and what we are. It's returning to our divine nature that is meant to express on this earth plane. We're here to be that presence in earthly form. And what's been striking me a lot lately as I'm in meditation is, you know, spirit has incarnated as each one of us. Not one of us is more spiritual than anyone else. Jesus wasn't more spiritual than we are. Buddha wasn't more spiritual than we are. Krishna, all the great ones, all the holy ones. You know, the Dalai Lama is no more spiritual than you are. We are all spirit itself. Now the realization of it can be stronger in some people than others. And my intention, and I know it's the purpose for each of us, is to come home to that awareness of my divinity, to come home to the awareness of your divinity and those qualities of the divine that are eternal. And joy is one of those qualities. Love is one of those qualities. Peace is one of those qualities. Order, harmony, wisdom, intelligence, beauty. These are all qualities of the divine that are fully present, fully orbed in each and every one of us. So how can I return home to myself? Oh, and what I was going to tell you, I almost forgot what I was going to tell you, is that yes, always I've been in the awareness of I'm an incarnation of pure spirit here to radiate the light and the love and the glory of God and all of that. And what's been hitting me really deeply lately is that each one of us is a way that spirit can experience life on this earth plane. Spirit has no form. We are the form it takes. Nature is the form it takes. All the critters are the form it takes. So anyway, I just put that out for you because it's been a contemplation for me, you know, that spirit gets to experience in human form through and as us. That in itself gives me a sense of joy. Oh, wow, that's a different way of looking at things. So that being said, how do I stay in touch with that deep inner joy without needing to have approval from other people, without needing to have experiences in my life that conform to my idea of what I think my life should look like? How can I move into that place within that is always joyful? And the first thing I would tell you is something we talk a lot about here, is to, when you're feeling the sadness, when you're feeling the anxiety, when you're feeling the worry, and all of us do, you know, we're still in this incarnation, we're still working it, so to speak, you know, it's working us. And so when I'm experiencing worry, anxiety, fear, you know, because it all goes back to fear, and ultimately it all goes back to separation. When I'm experiencing that, what do? I certainly don't try to push it away. We know that old saying, what I resist persists. So the last thing you want to do when these, we might call them lower level vibrations, show up, we don't want to push them away at all. What we want to do is be keenly aware of them. We want to feel them in the body. Where am I feeling this worry? Where am I feeling this fear? Where am I feeling this anxiety? We want to become aware of it. We want to breathe into it. And we want to refrain from judging it. We want to simply be aware, to feel it and to notice it. And I know I sometimes I think, oh, you know, they've heard this a million times from me, but I always know too that maybe that millionth time is the time that touches you at a deeper level. And so I'm noticing, let's say I'm anxious about something. So I'm noticing it, I'm noticing the feeling. And for me, that anxiety usually hangs out in my solar plexus area. For some people, it's the neck and shoulders. For some people, it's different areas. Just notice and notice the energy. And I get to watch it. I get to simply notice it. Because by being the observer, I am creating a spacious field in which these vibrations can release themselves. They will. And I can guarantee this because I practiced it so often. They will release themselves. And you can go to that place, it's a little even deeper. You can ask yourself, who is it that is observing this? Who is it that is observing this? And when I look at that, I notice that there's that part of me that is pure awareness itself, that can observe what's going on in my life. It can observe the feelings, it can observe the actions, it can observe the thoughts, and not be those things, if you know what I mean. Just it's like a spacious ground of being in which these things arise and leave. And the things that are left after these feelings pass through, what's left is the love, the peace, the joy, the harmony. And we get to have a deeper, an experience of a deeper level of feeling without, here's the deal here, without getting attached to that experience. Because it comes and it goes, right? There are waves in life. They come and they go in everything in life. And so I get to not be attached to that or think that I'm really more evolved than the next person because I am feeling the joy. No, you know, simply I'm feeling the joy, I love the feeling, and I'm not attached to it. So when the anxiety, the worry, the fear, the insecurity comes up again, I get to go through the same process. I feel it, I observe it. And it's amazing, it's beautiful. Recently, I was asked to say a few words. It was a Zoom memorial event. Somebody whose son had overdosed on drugs about a year ago. And he asked me just to say a few words. And it was at a time when I only had about 15 or 20 minutes. And he said, that's fine. I just want you to say something. Well, I did what I thought was a real screw up. I thought I really screwed up. And I didn't intend to share this with you, but I will. because it's embarrassing to me that I said this. But what came out of my mouth was that his son, who was in his 20s, and remember, it was an overdose. And what came out of my mouth was that he had committed suicide. Now I was appalled because I realized, oh my God, I have made this gigantic mistake. So I have to tell you, after I left the call, I was in quite a state. I was very upset, and I got to practice this. And the next day it was still lingering. I got to keep practicing. And I texted the person that asked me to do this. And I said, I'm so sorry that I made that mistake. Well, you know what he texted back? He said, your words were beautiful. And he said, there was no mistake. He said, because a lot of people were thinking that it was suicide and they needed to hear about that. And so I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? That what I thought was this huge mistake, and what was really bringing me to a place of, I certainly screwed up. I didn't do this right. I probably really embarrassed the person that asked me to do it. And it wasn't that case at all. It was no, he says, it was absolutely perfect. He said, you picked it up in the field. That's what was going on. And so even though I corrected it that night, we corrected it, but still, do you see, and I still can't, I still can't explain, the what of it, but I know now that it was absolutely perfect. And yet I allowed myself to be in deep worry, well, not worry, what's the word? Disappointment about it, more than disappointment. I allowed myself to go to a place of, oh, see, you've done millions of these memorials and didn't do it right and blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you can all relate to that. You might have done it sometime in your own life. And it was perfect, it was perfect. And even if it hadn't been, it was an opportunity for me to come back to my own internal joy. It was an opportunity for me to come back to my wholeness, because the divine essence of me that was the observer, that is the observer, makes no judgments, doesn't see right or wrong. One of those of you who have seen my emails over and over know that my favorite Rumi quote is, beyond all wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. That's beyond all wrongdoing and right doing. There's no right and wrong in spirit. God doesn't say this is right, this is wrong, despite what many of our traditional religions have said. That's not the case. Spirit is totally non-judgmental. So when we go to that place of being the observer, we are totally non-judgmental about ourselves. We can embrace ourselves. That's where true compassion happens, where we can simply be, oh, okay, this happened. And I had to work it. I had to work it before even this person expressed his gratitude to me. And I'm grateful that he didn't express it until I had worked it, because it allowed me to move to a deeper place of self-appreciation, of self-love, no matter what the human personality did, no matter what the words said. Spirit is my life. All is well with me. I am whole and perfect, despite what looked like a glaring error. I have to breathe for a minute because I didn't expect to say all that. You all pulled these things out of me, So, the ancient sages have always said that all of fear, all of insecurity, all of these lower vibration feelings are all born of duality, of that sense of separation. And that's, in fact, what the Garden of Eden story is all about in Hebrew scripture. It's about a sense of separation starting to form in human consciousness. And so any sense of fear, insecurity, worry, doubt, all of that is born of separation. I don't see myself as the perfection of spirit. I don't see the world around me as the perfection of spirit. And the reality is that invisible world, the world of spirit, is more real than the visible world. And we can live in that invisible world, and that's heaven, and that's joy, and that's bliss. And we get to work with it. Or as I like to say often, it works us. It gets to work us. It gives us the opportunities. If I set the intention to return to my innate joy, believe me, I will receive opportunities. Because in this past couple of weeks, I've been aware that this was the topic, and yet this whole memorial service thing happened. And then other things have been on my mind, and I've gotten to just go, okay, I'm working it now, because I can't give a talk without working it. It always shows up. So, what do I want to say? When we know who we really are, when I know my innate wholeness, when I live from my, as Dr. Sue Morter says, from my soul self, from my spirit, from who I really am, when I'm living from that place, remembering that place, then I know that nothing can threaten me. I know that even those things that have happened in the past, maybe betrayals, maybe abuse, and some of these things that I know some of you have experienced are really horrible in human terms. And I'm not saying that it was okay to experience those things, but what I'm saying is that there's a core of you, a part of you, the bigger part of you, not the tip of the iceberg, but that huge berg underneath the tip of the iceberg. That's your divine self, has never been hurt, harmed, endangered. Never, ever, ever. Has never even made a mistake. That's where we want to return, to that place in consciousness. And in that place in consciousness, we realize I am the love, I am the joy, I am the peace, I am the all good of spirit, I am a unique way that heaven has come to earth. This is joy. This is joy. And you see, you can know that and sense that within yourself, even in the midst of angst, even in the midst of pain, even in the midst of sorrow and grief. You can still be in touch with that, because these experiences of angst, pain, sorrow, grief, these experiences are fleeting. They don't stay. They pass through. And so we want to be aware of this. Jesus said, "This too shall pass." And it said too, it came to pass. And I like to say, it came to pass. The joy, the anguish came in order to pass. The sadness came in order to pass. So it's returning to that place within, returning to that place within. And it takes some time, self-forgiveness. I had to work on forgiving myself. It takes being with those uncomfortable feelings that we don't want to feel. It takes sometimes feeling the judgment we have against ourselves, and just observing the judgment, letting that pass. And my final point that I want to make is you can choose joy. You can decide that you want to live a life of joy. And I know this. I know this so well, because I think I've told you before that even as a child, at some point, I just took on a lot of worry and a lot of anxiety. I know I came from an alcoholic family. I don't know if that's what it was, or if I was just a serious child, or what it was, but joy was not a quality that I embraced. I had experiences of fun and happiness, and I thought that those always came from the outer world. The reality that I know now is that the joy in me was activated by those experiences, you see. Those experiences can remind us, this joy's always been here. And this particular experience simply activates it within me, makes me remember that the joy is always present. I can always tap into it. Decide on joy. Decide to live a life of joy. You can do that. There's another story that I want to tell you. And I love this story. It's one of my favorites. I actually forgot about it until I looked it up. But this 92-year-old woman who was legally blind lost her husband of 70 years. Can you imagine? Being in a relationship for 70 years and her husband transitions. So on this particular day, she was moving into a nursing home. And actually, she sat in the lobby for like 3 hours before they took her to her room. Now, you would think a lot of people would be kind of grumpy at that point, wanting to assert themselves. But she was just kind of sitting there, being happy. um, and smiling sweetly at everybody. Finally, a nurse came to escort her to her room, and the nurse told her, she said, you know, you're really, I think you're really going to like this room. And she told her about the various aspects of the room, and she said, and we just put up eyelet curtains. We think you're really going to like it. And now, mind you, this woman is legally blind, but she's explaining all of this, which is great because she could, you know, the woman could get a sense of it. And what she said was, I love it. I love it already. And she said it with great enthusiasm. And the nurse said, well, you haven't seen it yet, or you haven't even been in it yet. How can you say you love it? And she said, that doesn't have anything to do with it. She said, happiness is something you decide on ahead of time. I already decided to love it. I already decided I was going to love it. And then she said, and I'm going to read this so I get it correct. She said, I made a decision. I make a decision every morning when I wake up. I have a choice. I can spend the day in bed recounting the difficulty I have with the parts of my body that no longer work. Or I can get out of bed and be thankful for the parts of me, of my body that do work. Each day is a gift, and as long as my eyes open, I'll focus on the new day and all the happy memories I've stored away just for this time in my life. And then she said, old age is like a bank account. You withdraw from what you've put in. And she said, my advice to you would be to deposit a lot of happiness in the bank account of memories. I am still depositing at 92. It's like, I'm not just going to withdraw, I'm going to still deposit. I'm going to still keep that circulation going. And then with a smile, she shared 5 simple rules to being happy. Free your heart from hatred. Free your mind from worries. Live simply. Give more and expect less. I'm going to say that one more time in case any of you want to copy those down. Free your heart from hatred. Free your mind from worry. Live simply. Give more. Expect less. What great guidelines for life, right? So you can choose. Like that story has always inspired me because she decided, she made a decision at some point in her life that no matter what, she was going to be happy, that she was going to wake up every day and be happy. And so I know that what was happening is that she had practiced that, and it's a spiritual practice, so thoroughly in her life that it became embedded in her consciousness, or as we say in our teaching, she embodied it. She became the joy. She became it to the point of even, you know, when she was left sitting in that lobby for 3 hours alone, she could have been very upset about it. Or she could have thought, well, this is a situation where I have to assert myself, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that. There isn't. However, she was so practiced in joy that she lived it all the time, no matter what. That's a powerful practice. And it's a rewarding practice. And I'm sure that woman had difficult experiences in her life. She had just lost her husband of 70 years, and yet she still found it in her heart to be joyful. You can find it in your heart to be joyful. And so I'm going to give you a challenge. And the challenge is twofold here. First of all, every day, look for signs of joy. Every day, look for signs of joy. As I say that, I'm reminded that this week is Earth Day on the 22nd. You know, all I have to do is go outside and look at nature. Signs of joy. You know, look for signs of joy. And then the second prong of that challenge is bring joy with you at least once a day. Create joy in someone's life. Create joy in your life. So first of all, look for the joy, notice it. The second part, be it. Take it with you. Even on days when you don't feel like being happy or joyful, and we all have those days. I know we all do. Bring joy to something, to someone. It can be a smile. It can be assisting somebody, whatever. Bring joy to nature, to the trees by consciously uniting with them, you know? You'll find ways, but every day I encourage you, look for joy, be the joy, and you will be depositing in your bank account of life, that bank account that contains within it all of the joy of your life, all of the love of your life, all of the peace of your life, all of the harmony, all of the beauty, all of the wisdom, all of that's within you. That's your real bank account. It's not what you did or accomplished, although those things are great. We aren't knocking them. Those things are wonderful. We are here to bring heaven to earth. The important thing is, did I become these divine qualities in the midst of all I was doing? And did I bring these qualities? And today we're focusing on joy. Did I bring it to everything that I did? Did I bring more love, more joy to the planet, even amidst, and I could go into a whole talk, which I won't right now, about all of the social injustices. You know, my heart bleeds, you know, for the victims of the mass shootings, for those that are victims of racial crimes, racial injustice. Every time I hear about it, you know, there's a part of me that, not part of me, I just get sad and I get angry about it, you know. I get angry. And in the midst of that, there is joy. I return to the joy. I return to the joy. And I remember that adding fuel, that by being angry, I'm adding fuel to the anger in the world. Come back to the joy. Come back to the joy, which is a high vibratory level. David Hawkins talks about it, or talked about it, as when you're in that vibration of joy, it's the same vibration as unconditional love. That's how high a vibration it is. So be it. Look for it, be it, become it.